Hi, this is Isabel Florence, and you are listening to You Are Light podcast, a safe space where we talk about mental health and well-being. Hello, my lovely. Welcome back to the Emotion series. Today, we're going to talk about guilt and shame. This is, again, another set of emotions that I used to confuse, but they are very distinct, and it's very beneficial for us to understand exactly what is shame and what is guilt. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why. So while guilt is focused on behavior and events, as in I have done something wrong, shame is the belief that you are wrong, that the problem with it is you. Shame is more generalized and it is directed to the individual. It is the belief that you yourself are inadequate, that you are flawed, and therefore not deserving of love and acceptance. So guilt may actually help you become a better person by understanding how to do better in the future, according to what you've done wrong in the past. But shame results in you believing that you are not worthy enough to even change, that the problem is with you and not the situation. And I believe there is a connection between shame and perfectionism. This idea that something out there is ideal and you should strive for it means that you are always feeling unworthy and not good enough. Shame comes from this idea that you should, and every should that we have in our lives has been created either by society or by a parental figure. We don't live as children believing that we should look like this, we should behave like that. But these ideas are presented to us as we grow up. Shame is also closely related to Jung's concept of shadow. And I have episodes on the shadow that you can listen to. It is the aspects of the self that we do not want to accept, and therefore we repress them within. The more we repress them and the more we feel shame towards real aspects of ourselves, the more these aspects influence our actions unconsciously. When you shame others for who they are, because that's what shame is, believing that someone is not good enough by just being who they are, you shame your true self as well. You reject your true self as well. Shame is very internal, but it is highly influenced by our external world. So it stems from comparison. It's driven by a fear of being judged by others. And it is a feeling of being disconnected to what is accepted by society. What we need to understand is that shame is a universal emotion, unless you're a psychopath. So even though this emotion leads you to feeling isolated, leads you to feeling inadequate and different, withdrawn, it is actually something that we all share. So we got to remember that. You are not lonely in the feeling of shame that you feel. You are not lonely in the self-rejection that you go through. Now, guilt, as I said, is primarily focused on a behavior or a specific action. So it's actually something external from you. It's not the judgment of the self. It's the judgment of the action or the behavior. So it's a lot healthier in a way. It stems from you believing you have done something wrong. You violated your own morals. From then, you can very clearly decide to act differently from now on. It reminds you of your ethical standards. It reminds you of who you want to be. It is taking responsibility for your own actions. It should lead to you taking accountability for your actions. And it is seen as a more adaptable emotion because it means you can change. You have the belief that you can change. With shame, the unworthiness, the problem is with you. So you feel like you can't do anything differently in the future. So if we can transform our shame into guilt, we can walk away from self-rejection, from the feeling of inadequacy, from the flawed feeling of unworthiness. You have done something wrong. It is not who you are. It is a behavior that you chose to have in a specific point in your life. It is not connected to your true self. Brené Brown says, shame is highly, highly correlated with addiction, depression, violence, aggression, bullying, suicide, eating disorders. Guilt is inversely correlated with those things. The ability to hold something we've done or failed to do up against who we want to be is incredibly adaptive. So when you've done something wrong, try to believe that this is not who you are. As I said in that episode about control, the only constant in life is change. You are constantly changing. So therefore, you cannot place yourself in a box as unlovable, as wrong, as someone who is not worthy, or as someone who is lazy, someone who is unhealthy, who doesn't work hard for what they believe, as a bad parent. It is your choice to be one of those things. You can feel guilt for the behaviors that you had in the past, but you can choose to change it. You can choose to change your reality. So how can we change it? Try to respond with empathy for yourself when you feel shame or guilt. Understand that everything that you have gone through in the past has led to where you are right now. Some of these things were out of your control. Believe that deep down you're a good human being. Have empathy for that good human being. Let's not label people as liars or stupid or bad people or lazy, because it can become their identity. They can become attached to these labels, and then it is very difficult to step away from it, even though it's possible. And don't do that to yourself. Don't label yourself with negative adjectives. You're just doing yourself a disservice. You're not respecting the reality of the universe, the changeable reality of the universe. So identify your triggers. What is it that makes you feel shame? Practice self-compassion. So remember that everyone makes mistakes and that you're a human being. Then challenge any negative beliefs that you might have. Try to understand where they are coming from. Are these negative beliefs based on facts? Or are they maybe distorted perceptions of who you are? Remind yourself that you are worthy just as a human being and not solely determined by your actions, your accomplishments, that you are more than enough by just being. Focus on accountability. What is it that I did wrong? How can I amend this wrongdoing? Can I apologize to anyone? Can I decide to act in a different way from now on? And remember that there's no such thing as perfection. You are not going to be a perfect human being. Those words cannot live in the same sentence. There's no such thing. Nietzsche wrote, "What is the seal of liberation? To no longer be ashamed of oneself." Does freedom equate to letting go of shame? Possibly. Freedom is to become who you are fully, and you cannot do so with shame. It's also very interesting to observe that society makes women and men feel shameful for very different things. And this makes it so clear how created this shame is. Shame for women is do not let them see your struggle while doing everything right, doing everything as you're supposed to do. And for men, shame is in vulnerability. Do not show vulnerability. Do not be perceived as weak. So I would encourage all the women to allow the men in their lives to feel vulnerable, to show vulnerability. I would encourage all women to recognize men's vulnerability as strength. And I would encourage all the men to allow women to break down, to feel overwhelmed, to not be looking perfect all the time, to be listened without having to be given solutions for all of their problems. It's a fascinating subject. I know that I myself have felt a lot of shame, and when I did, it led me to self-destructive behaviors. And we don't deserve that because it is not our fault. The ideal that we all strive for is something that has been created and not even by us. So there's no reason to feel shame about not being that. Nobody really is. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I want to ask you to please subscribe if you enjoy the podcast. It makes a huge difference. I love you very much. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening. All the links are written down on the show notes, as well as resources for anyone struggling with their mental health. Don't forget to subscribe so you're notified when we release new episodes. Also, feel free to share our podcast with your friends and family. And if you'd like to get involved, explore our content, or support our work, visit our website www.yourlight.earth. That's YOUR light.earth. Also, don't forget to follow us on Instagram at u.r.light. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time.